Alright, this was just one of many crazy games to start the year, and the similarity in the first half was just both teams playing with pace, because whenever either side got a stop, they were looking to catch the other side's defense not being set, so there were a lot of runouts. For the Nugs, they were either pushing the rock, or Yoke was throwing his patented outlet once he secured the board, but for the Dubs, that was their best source of offense, because in the half court, the Nugs' defensive game plan was to have Yoke show against Steph in his screening actions, so he was being forced off the rock a lot, and even though he was creating good looks on the backside for the others, the Dubs just couldn't capitalize on his gravity enough. At least they did exploit some mismatches because of the Nugs switching most matchups, so they were able to put the Nugs in a scramble to create out of that and not solely have to rely on Steph, but even with those, they still weren't scoring enough to keep up with the Nugs on the other end. Per usual, that two-man game between Maul and Yoke was basically unguardable, because no matter how the Dubs tried to defend it, those two were always making the right reads off each other, especially Maul, so he was getting to his spots every time, and it was really his patience that was paying off. All he had to do was wait for Dre to retreat, because the Dubs were having Dre show off his screens, and whenever Dre didn't want to commit and help off of Yoke, he would just eat that space to get his, but whenever Dre did, he would just hit Yoke in the pocket for him to get his, so that created a lose-lose scenario every time. It was even somewhat the same with Valanciunas, because he knows how to provide an outlet on the short, and more importantly, he knows how to flash middle against zones, so he can also make reads as a big. He's probably the best backup Yoke's ever had, and I almost started feeling bad for Dre, because he was really trying on the help, but it rarely led to stops once Maul's defender trailed the play, so I could tell he was getting frustrated. Maul was scoring damn near every time he had the rock in his hands, and it was really no different whenever Aaron had it, because he got two wide open looks from deep off a couple low boards early that put the Dubs in a scramble, so he got on a ridiculous heater. I don't think the Dubs expected that at all, because even after those, they were still off his body, going under screens, or had no urgency to close out on him, so he got to maintain it, and him and Yoke trailing it non-stop in the second led to the Nugs getting control of the game. Those two just started playing their own two-man game, and that even turned into their three-man game with Maul off their Spanulis variation with the RIP DHO, so whenever any one of them had the rock, good things happened. If they weren't going to their patented screening actions, then they were just finding Aaron in the post for bully ball, and they were able to maintain their control throughout the second half, but unfortunately, they couldn't hold on to their lead in the last 4 minutes of the fourth. So once the Dubs walked them down, it was inevitable for them to lose because the Dubs had all the momentum entering OT. Surprisingly, the Nugs just weren't able to get a bucket when they got out on the switch from Maul, and Yoke couldn't finish in the paint or make his pops from deep. But even worse was what happened on the other end, because they let Steph get going in the second half. It all started in the third when they were a little too relaxed for a split second, because those instances allowed him to get a couple clean looks from deep off a screen, and similar to Aaron, those were all it took for him to go on a ridiculous heater, so he couldn't miss for the rest of the night. This performance was a perfect example of just how difficult it is to guard him, because physically, it's hard to chase him all game, and mentally, it's even harder to stay focused enough to track him for the full 48, so those possessions where Brown wasn't ready, or when Yoke was way too low with his coverages, he made the Nugs pay for it. He was responsible for the Dubs getting back into the game in the third, then eventually running it back late in the fourth off his 11-0 run. And fortunately for them, the others were able to show up in OT by capitalizing on the momentum shift he created, but unfortunately for Aaron, he couldn't top off his 50-piece by out-Stephing Steph in his own game. Just watch the tape.